Imagine a world where the wind carries voices from millennia ago, where the land itself remembers what humankind has forgotten. Tonight, we journey to one of Earth's most enduring enigmas, the silent circle of Stonehenge. Beneath the soft glow of the moon, on the open plains of southern England, a ring of ancient stones rises from the earth, solemn, weathered, and unyielding. They have stood for more than 4,000 years, older than the pyramids of Giza, older than the written word in Britain. Their surfaces are etched not only by the hands of time, but by the breath of countless generations who have gazed upon them in wonder. No one knows exactly why they were built. No one knows the full story of those who raised them. And yet, their presence speaks in a language older than words of faith, of purpose, and of an unshakable connection between people, the earth, and the stars. Close your eyes and picture it. The mist rolling over Salisbury Plain, the rhythmic pulse of distant drums echoing across the landscape. A gathering of figures beneath the dawn, men and women clothed in furs and woven fabrics, their faces lit by firelight and conviction. They look to the horizon, where the sun is about to rise, and at its first golden beam, it touches the heel-stone, aligning perfectly, precisely, deliberately. This was no accident. This was a message carved in stone, meant to outlast its makers. Stonehenge is not merely a monument. It is a memory set in rock, a whisper from a civilization that lived, dreamed, and vanished long before ours began. And tonight, as we drift through its story, we'll let those whispers guide us toward peace, toward reflection, and, perhaps, toward sleep. Long before the stones were ever raised, there was the land wild, untamed, and vast. The Salisbury Plain stretched in every direction, a sea of grass and heather swaying beneath shifting skies. The wind carried the scent of rain, and the calls of birds echoed over the ridges. Here, in this open wilderness, humans found both hardship and harmony. We journey back to around 5,000 years ago, to a time when Britain was changing. The last hunters had begun to settle, turning the soil with primitive tools of wood and stone. They learned to farm, to build permanent homes, to bury their dead with care and ceremony. Their world was ruled by the rhythm of nature, the length of the day, the arc of the sun, the turning of the seasons. Imagine a small community gathered by a riverbank, the Avon, perhaps, whose name would one day echo through history. They build circular houses of wattle and daub, roofed with thatch. Smoke curls lazily from the hearths. Children chase each other through the grass, while elders sit near the fire, shaping tools from flint. Life was simple, but it was not easy. Each harvest depended on the rain. Each winter tested the tribe's endurance. And yet, they thrived, guided by something greater than survival. Above them, the heavens turned, the moon waxing and waning, the sun rising and setting with divine precision. For these people, the sky was not empty. It was alive. It held power, mystery, and meaning. Every dawn and dusk carried messages from unseen forces, gods, ancestors, or perhaps the earth itself. In this world, death was not an end, but a continuation, a transformation. The dead were buried with care, often curled as if asleep, surrounded by offerings, beads, pottery, and small carvings. Each burial was a promise that the living would remember, and that the dead would, in turn, protect. It is here, in this deep bond between land, sky, and spirit, that the idea of Stonehenge may have first been born. Perhaps it began as a circle of wooden posts, a sacred space, a gathering place for ceremony. Or perhaps it was older still, rooted in myths carried from distant lands across the sea. Whatever its origin, the dream of raising great stones of fixing the heavens into the earth began to take shape. Picture the first builders, standing on that open plain, staring into the distance. They imagined something eternal, a circle that would bind them to the cosmos. They could not have known that what they were about to begin would still stand 5,000 years later. They marked the ground. They dug a wide circular ditch over 100 meters across, with nothing but antler picks and determination. They raised banks of chalk earth, gleaming white under the sun. At its center, they placed wooden posts, or perhaps smaller stones, to honor their gods and ancestors. And thus, the first Stonehenge or something like it was born. It wasn't yet the monument we know today. It was simpler, humbler, but already sacred. A space where people gathered at solstices, where life and death met under the gaze of the stars, where stories were told and songs were sung long into the night. As the centuries passed, the circle grew in both meaning and ambition. Generations came and went, each adding, adjusting, refining. The monument evolved as if alive, shaped by belief and by time. Centuries passed, and generations came and went, yet the dream endured. From wooden posts and chalk circles, the vision evolved into something far more ambitious. The people of the plain had learned to read the earth as if it were scripture. They knew where the ground was firm, where it sang beneath their feet, and where it seemed to breathe. And they chose one place above all others, a gentle rise of land where the horizon met the sky in every direction. Here, they would raise the stones. No one can say who first spoke the idea aloud. Perhaps it was an elder, gazing into the embers of a dying fire, who whispered, "Let us build with the bones of the earth itself." Perhaps it was a dream, carried from another land, a memory of ancient shrines built far away. Whatever its origin, it began as an act of faith, of imagination. And faith, once kindled, spreads like flame. The first stones to arrive were the blue stones, smaller than the great sarsens, but heavy beyond reckoning. Each one weighed up to 4 tons, and yet they were carried, dragged, and ferried across 240 kilometers of wild, rugged land from the Preseli Hills of western Wales to this open plain in England. Close your eyes and imagine the journey. A caravan of people and oxen moving slowly through forests and valleys. Logs rolled beneath the stones, ropes pulled tight by dozens of calloused hands. The air thick with effort, with breath, with song. They followed rivers, the Severn, the Avon, guiding their floating cargo on crude rafts of timber. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Some stones were lost, others cracked or sank beneath the water. But still, they came driven by something that defied reason. It was not for glory. It was not for conquest. It was for reverence, for connection to the heavens, to their ancestors, and to each other. When they finally reached Salisbury Plain, they placed the blue stones in a rough oval, like a heart taking its first beat. And in the years that followed, the monument continued to grow, as if guided by a will of its own. The people had learned that the earth could hold memory and that stone could speak without words. They began to quarry even larger stones, the sarsens, each weighing up to 40 tons. These lay closer, scattered across the Marlborough Downs, but their weight was unimaginable. To move them, they crafted sledges of wood and wet the ground with water to ease the drag. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people worked together, chanting in rhythm, pulling with ropes made from twisted plant fibers. The sound must have carried for miles, a deep, human heartbeat echoing across the land. At last, the stones stood upright, arranged in a perfect circle. Some were capped with lintels, horizontal stones carefully shaped to fit like puzzle pieces atop the uprights. They locked together using tongue and groove joints, a technique unseen anywhere else at the time. And when the work was done, a ring of towering stones stood before them, vast, silent, eternal. The monument was more than a structure. It was an act of unity of a people bound together by purpose, sweat, and spirit. It was their cathedral, their calendar, their mirror of the sky. When the sun rose on the solstice, its light passed through the heel stone, between the uprights, and touched the heart of the circle. It was a moment of divine alignment, the union of heaven and earth. Each year, at that precise instant, the builders would gather. They would sing, they would feast, they would honor the dead, and they would remember the promise they had carved into the soil, that humanity and the cosmos were one. To understand Stonehenge, we must first understand the hands that built it. They were not nameless or faceless. They were people just like us. Mothers, fathers, children, dreamers. They laughed, they wept, they feared, they hoped. Archaeology tells us that these were farming communities, early Britons, who lived in timber houses nearby, perhaps in the settlement known as Durrington Walls. There, by the river Avon, they built circular villages full of life and warmth. We know from the remnants of hearths that they feasted together, roasting pigs and cattle, sharing food from every corner of the island. They gathered not only to build, but to celebrate. To them, the act of raising stones was not work, it was worship. The builders of Stonehenge were not slaves, nor subjects of a tyrant. They were collaborators, joined by shared purpose. The evidence suggests that people came from across Britain, even from the distant highlands of Scotland, bringing gifts, tools, and songs. For a short time, Stonehenge may have been the center of their world, a gathering place for tribes who otherwise lived far apart. Imagine the nights there, the fires flickering between half-finished stones, smoke curling into the starry sky. The sound of drums, of singing, of laughter carried on the wind, children asleep beside the fires, elders telling stories of creation and destiny. 1,000 hearts beating together beneath the arc of the Milky Way. It is easy, in our modern world, to see them as primitive, but perhaps they were closer to the universe than we are now. They understood the seasons not by calendars, but by the feel of the earth beneath their feet. They measured time not by hours, but by the dance of light and shadow across stone. And in those rhythms, they found harmony. When we look at Stonehenge today, we see ruins, but they saw perfection. Every angle, every alignment, every opening held meaning. The stones were set to mark the longest day and the shortest night, to predict the moon's cycles, and perhaps to honor those who had passed from this world to the next. Some bones found nearby bear marks of long journeys, people who came from far away to be buried here, as if resting in the shadow of the stones granted peace in the afterlife. Others show signs of healing rituals. Perhaps this was a place of renewal, where the wounded came to be restored by the power of the earth and the touch of the divine. The builders left no written records, but they left something greater, a feeling. Stand among the stones, even today, and you can sense it, a silence that hums, a stillness that speaks. It is the echo of their faith, their labor, their love for a world that was vast and mysterious. They did not build Stonehenge to be understood. They built it to be felt. As the centuries rolled on, The meaning of Stonehenge deepened like ripples widening on a still pond. What began as an act of unity and reverence became something far greater, a dialogue between humankind and the heavens. Each stone was not merely placed, but aligned to the sun, the moon, and the cardinal points of the compass. At midsummer, the rising sun would pierce through the heart of the circle, touching the altar stone with golden light. At midwinter, the sun would set precisely between the tallest uprights on the opposite side, as if bowing to the earth before sinking into darkness. To the people who stood here, this was not coincidence. It was communion. Imagine the solstice morning, a silence that hangs thick and expectant. Hundreds of people gathered, wrapped in animal skins and woven cloaks, their breath misting in the cold dawn air. A low hum rises, part chant, part heartbeat. And then, as the sun breaks over the horizon, a collective sigh escapes the crowd. Light streams through the stones, striking the earth like a living flame. For a moment, time itself seems to pause. The world is in balance. These moments of cosmic alignment were sacred. They marked the turning of the seasons, the end of the long, dark nights, and the promise of renewal. But they were also reminders of something deeper, that humanity is part of a larger rhythm bound to the movements of the sky. The builders of Stonehenge may not have known the word astronomy, but they understood the heavens more intimately than most of us ever will. They watched the stars move, the moon wax and wane, the sun climb higher or sink lower each day. Their survival depended on it, on knowing when to sow, when to harvest, when to prepare for winter's bite. But beyond survival, there was awe. They saw order where others saw chaos patterns that spoke of gods and cycles and endless return. Some researchers believe Stonehenge functioned as a vast calendar, a kind of prehistoric observatory. Others see it as a temple, a place where the movements of the sky were mirrored in stone, a bridge between earth and eternity. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps, for those who gathered there, the distinction didn't matter. In their world, science and spirit were one. Even today, when you stand within the circle at dawn, you can feel that same sense of precision and mystery. The stones seem to hum with unseen geometry. Every shadow and beam of light feels deliberate, as if the earth itself were performing an ancient ritual, one written in sunlight and silence. And maybe that's the truest purpose of Stonehenge, not simply to measure the heavens, but to remind us that we belong to them, to remind us that, like the stones, we too are part of a greater pattern shaped by time, by gravity, by the eternal dance of creation and decay. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine lying on the grass within that circle, the cold stone at your back, the endless sky above. The stars shimmer like scattered embers, and the moon glides between the great lintels, tracing a path drawn thousands of years ago. You feel the pull of the universe steady, ancient, comforting, and you realize nothing is ever truly lost. Everything moves in rhythm, forever returning to where it began. As the light fades from the horizon and shadows stretch across the plain, Stonehenge takes on another meaning. For all its astronomical precision, it was also a place of spirit, a threshold between the world of the living and that of the dead. Excavations around the site have uncovered the remains of men, women, and children, some laid carefully in shallow graves, others cremated and placed in small pits around the circle. The earth here is full of stories of endings, of beginnings. Some of the remains show signs of long journeys. They came from distant lands, carried by families who believed this was holy ground. To die here was not tragedy, it was honor. Perhaps Stonehenge was a temple of ancestors, a place where the living came to speak to the dead. Each stone, a monument to a lineage, a life remembered, a soul reborn. The alignment of light and shadow may have marked the passage of spirits, the sun guiding them to the afterlife or back again at dawn. When the midsummer sun rose, it could have symbolized birth, renewal, the triumph of light. When the midwinter sun set between the stones, it may have signified rest, reflection, and the long sleep before rebirth. The entire monument was a living calendar of life and death, of cycles that mirrored not just the sky, but the human heart. For the people who gathered here, ritual was not separate from life. Every movement, the lighting of a fire, the placement of a stone, the beating of a drum carried meaning. They did not pray for miracles, they performed them. Their rituals were acts of balance, keeping the world aligned with the heavens. Even sound played a part. Recent studies suggest that Stonehenge has unique acoustic properties, the stones reflecting and amplifying voices in haunting ways. Chants and drums might have echoed within the circle, wrapping participants in waves of resonance. To those who stood inside, it would have felt as though the stones themselves were singing deep, steady, eternal. And when the rituals ended, the people would drift back to their villages, carrying embers from the sacred fires. They would return to their homes by torchlight, guided by the stars, their hearts full of calm. The monument would remain behind, silent once more, waiting for the next turning of the sun. In that silence lies its true power. Stonehenge does not demand attention, it invites stillness. It teaches us to listen not with our ears, but with our bones, with our breath. The stones have stood for 5,000 years, through storms and empires and the rise of modern civilization. They ask nothing, yet they give endlessly a reminder that endurance itself is sacred. As night deepens over Salisbury Plain, the wind moves softly through the grass. The sky unfurls in velvet darkness, and the stars shimmer like ancient eyes. Each one burns with the same light that once guided those early builders. Each one whispers the same message. You are part of something vast, and it remembers you. And so, Stonehenge remains not just a monument, but a meditation, a place where the human spirit and the infinite meet, where silence speaks louder than words, where time stands still. Time is a patient sculptor. What once was sacred ground has become history, and yet the spirit remains. The people who built Stonehenge are long gone, their names forgotten, their songs silent, but their work endures. Through frost and rain, through conquest and neglect, the stones have never fallen completely silent. When the Romans came to Britain, they found the circle already ancient. They saw it as a place of mystery, perhaps even fear. They built their own temples elsewhere, but they left Stonehenge untouched, as though even they, masters of empire, sensed something beyond their understanding. To them, it was a relic of an older magic, a language of earth and sky that no conqueror could erase. Centuries later, as Christianity spread across the land, Stonehenge was reimagined once more. To some, it became a curiosity. To others, a relic of pagan rites. Medieval travelers wrote of giants who had carried the stones from distant lands, or of Merlin the wizard, who raised them by enchantment. In their myths, the stones were alive, each one a witness, each one holding a soul. And though their tales were born of imagination, they carried an echo of truth, that Stonehenge has always been more than mere stone. Through the Middle Ages and into the Age of Kings, the monument stood patient, weathered, enduring. Shepherds grazed their flocks nearby. Storms lashed at the plain, and still the stones held their vigil. Then came the age of curiosity, the 18th and 19th centuries. Scholars and travelers flocked to see the ruins, sketching them, measuring them, speculating endlessly about their purpose. Each generation saw what it needed to see. Some called it a druidic temple, others a royal tomb, others still a monument to lost knowledge. But in every theory, there lingered awe, a quiet reverence that transcended fact. In the modern age, Stonehenge has become a symbol of mystery, of endurance, of humanity's endless desire to connect with the unknown. Each year, thousands gather at the solstices once more, watching the sun rise through the stones, just as their ancestors did 5 millennia ago. They bring music, color, laughter, and for a brief moment, the circle lives again. The same golden light spills across the same ancient ground, uniting the living with the long departed. And yet, for all the visitors and studies and cameras, Stonehenge still refuses to give up its final secret. It remains what it has always been, a riddle wrapped in silence, a poem written in stone. Perhaps that is its greatest gift, that we cannot fully understand it, for mystery invites wonder, and wonder invites stillness. In not knowing, we find peace. Now, the night deepens. The last of the sunlight fades beyond the hills, and the plain sinks into quiet. The air grows cool. The stones cast long shadows beneath a silver moon. Listen, the wind hums through the gaps between the uprights, carrying whispers of centuries long past. You can almost hear the footsteps of the builders, the creak of ropes, the murmur of voices in a language lost to time. Their echoes linger, soft and eternal. Stonehenge stands not just as a monument to their labor, but as a mirror reflecting all who come to it. Each visitor brings their own questions, their own searching heart, and in its silence, the stones answer not with words, but with calm. If you stand there, alone, at dawn or dusk, you might feel it a pulse beneath your feet, faint but steady. It is the rhythm of the earth itself, unchanged for thousands of years. The same rhythm that guided the builders, that carried the rivers, that shaped the stars. A reminder that everything is connected, that all beginnings and endings are one and the same. The circle of life, the circle of time, the circle of stone. Somewhere, far beyond the horizon, the sun will rise again, and when it does, its light will fall across the same ancient pattern. It will touch the heel stone, pass through the circle, and greet the waiting earth, just as it has done for 5,000 years, just as it will for 5,000 more. And as we drift now, between waking and sleep, we too become part of that cycle. The breath slows, the body softens, the mind quiets, the stones remain, and the stars above them burn untroubled, eternal, the same stars that shone on the builders, on the shepherds, on the dreamers who came after. All of them gone, yet all of them here in the air, in the soil, in the heartbeat of the world. So let the story fade now, like the last embers of a distant fire. Let the wind carry what words remain. Stonehenge does not need us to remember it. It remembers itself. It endures, as all true wonders do not through explanation, but through presence. Breathe. Feel the stillness that lies beneath the noise of the world. The stillness that has always been there, waiting just beyond the edge of thought. That is where Stonehenge lives. That is where the builders rest. That is where you too can rest. For time is only a circle, turning endlessly beneath the stars, and in that turning there is peace.